be heard.
What's the deal with Hazbin Hotel?
Great start. Great start. Um, hello, everyone. It's me. It's Madeline. Coming to you on a Tuesday, a little different than usual, but for a very good reason. I am joined by an incredible guest. She is a fellow YouTuber. She makes incredible video essays, and she was kind enough to feature me in a couple of them. Thank you for that. And her recent Hazbin Hotel video essay, I think, is wonderful and incredible. So everyone, please give a warm chat, likes, F's in the chat, whatever you're supposed to say, to Flowergothic.
Hello.
Hi. How you feeling? How you feeling this Tuesday? I guess is this afternoon for you or evening?
Yeah,
or
it's about like 4 p.m. where I'm at.
So early
But
evening.
like I
yeah.
have a weird schedule, so
Right.
kind of like evening for me by now, but it is what it is.
Mm-hmm. It's 2:00 here, so it's a late afternoon. I would say. That we still have that sunny Southern California weather. Don't know why I'm talking like a radio personality, like a really bad one on like local FM radio, but it's fun. I'm totally not nervous at all. You are my first guest on on the show, so this is very exciting. Congratulations, you broke ground. A woman
Thank you.
breaking
Thank
ground
you.
on a woman-run show. Again, we're winning, girl bosses, all that good stuff. Uh, so we've bonded over our shared interest in the works of Vivzy Pop. I believe we met when I was auditioning to voice one of your video essays, and you told me that you were a fan of my Hell of a Boss video essay that I made a year ago at this point.
Yeah, because like a friend of mine like sent me the video saying like, "Hey, you should watch this. You would like this." I did. I liked it, and then like you ended up like approaching me when I was doing a casting call for my video before the Hasman video, which is Sita Sings the Blues, and it took me a moment. I realized, wait, is this the person who did that Hell of a Boss video?
That was amazing to me because I didn't think anybody like would recognize me from that video. I was very amazed by the success it had, but that was like my first video essay that I really posted onto my channel. So that was really cool that a complete stranger knew my my video, and that was very exciting. And yeah, you know, I've been a fan of yours. I've heard about your content for many years. Finally got to sit down and really check it out once we connected. And yeah, that video that I first it was Sita Sings the Blues. To me was so fortuitous because I'd seen that movie in college, like in an animation class. So I was very familiar with that topic when I got that role.
Yeah, and like a decent number of people like had that same response to my video. Like, oh my god, like I saw this video. I saw the movie when I was in like college or when it like came out in theaters, and I didn't know that like there was so much like wrongness behind it. I guess.
Yeah. No, it was really interesting, and I want to say that was part of the conversation in my college, at least. Like it wasn't a large part of the conversation, but there was definitely something with the professor mentioning like, is this good for like a white woman to be making this video about Indian culture and all of that stuff. I don't remember it being a particularly large focus. I think most of the focus was kind of on the animation and just the kind of message behind all of it. But yeah, I mean, I've never heard of it since that college class, so that really was like a big kind of memory lane. But I guess it also kind of shows how little impact I think that really had because, yeah, besides that college film and then your video essay, I don't know anyone else who's still talking about it.
Yeah, and like that's probably for the best,
Yeah.
especially considering like Dina Paley's controversies.
Mm-hmm. I think it really because not to date myself, but I was when I saw this in college, it would have been like 2008, 2009. And back then, it really felt like you could just make a movie where you appropriate culture if you were like a different marginalized group. Like that seemed to be like a fair trade-off. Like if you were a woman, you could just kind of do whatever you wanted, and that was considered like equal. So like the idea of like her being a white woman, oh, she's like a woman. That's kind of like the same thing because we marginalize and subjugate both Indian people and women. So that's fine. That we allow that culturally and moralistically to happen. Thankfully, we are much smarter now as a culture. Not that much smarter, but a little bit smarter. That we kind of know that no, that's not okay.
That's not a fair trade-off.
That's not a fair trade-off at all. Um, but enough about Sita and her not great use of the blues. We are here to talk about Hazbin Hotel. I say that even though I'm actually going to need to get up and turn the air on because it's very hot here in California. So not to leave you alone for too long here. This is very professional of me. Flowergothic, I will be right back.
All right. How y'all doing today, everyone? Y'all doing good? Good. It is also very hot here, and on top of that, we've been experiencing a lot of humidity, so that's been very fun. In my background, you can see that my old chair, the one that was in like my past videos, is still here. I've been meaning to like toss that. I've been lazy though, and I totally am forgetting to. And trying to see like what else is visible in frame.
Okay.
All right, welcome back.
Thank you. I'm sure I missed so much. We've got 2 viewers so far, so hello, people watching, hanging out. Feel free to ask us questions in the chat if you want us to answer anything specific, and also a reminder that I do have a super chat, so feel free to utilize that at your.
Feel free to give her money.
Feel free to give me money. I found out that I can't access any of the money I've been getting from people until I reach $100 on my AdSense account, and right now it's at $16. So something to think about. Not pressuring anybody. We're all in a very hard place together, so I get it. But Flower, tell me what made you interested in Hazbin Hotel and making this video essay.
I would say that like about 2 years ago, I started like watching some of Viv's content, and of course this was before we had that much confirmed information about when Hazbin Hotel would release. But I remember watching it and just being like fascinated by it, and like I guess originally that fascinating feeling I was having was, oh, I must think this is a good show. But then after like rewatching everything, I just kind of realized, oh, it's just because like these characters are like cursing all the time, and there's no like real. Why can't I look away? That I'm not gaining anything from this.
Yeah, that's so interesting because I feel like that's what brought me to Vivzi's work as well. And I feel like at this point I have to say this must be my favorite show. Like she must be my favorite animator just because of how much I've talked about her work, and all of this stuff. I don't think any of it is particularly good, but I do find it so fascinating because I feel like it says a lot about the creators. Like it doesn't feel like an algorithmic show. Like it doesn't feel like something made by a computer. It feels like something made by an individual, and we see like all of the creators, the writers' flaws and problems, like in a work like this. And I find that so fascinating. Even if what it's painting is not the best picture, it's hard for me to really hate work that are just so accidentally honest as this one is.
Yeah.
So Hazbin Hotel, the show did finally come out on Amazon, and this was when you were starting to finally put together the pieces for your video essay.
Right. And I remember I was like messaging like you.
Yeah.
Because I just kept thinking like, what is this?
Mm-hmm.
Why is this why is it like, why are they going there? Why do they keep cursing every like 30 seconds?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And like I came in watching it with like no real like expectations on whether I would like it or if I would hate it. I saw like a couple of people on Twitter were like very much giving it scathing reviews, but I was trying to be cautiously optimistic. I was trying to, you know.
Yeah, well, in your video, yeah, sorry.
No, you're good. Not like, you know, be like too harsh or too like forgiving.
Right, and I think that equates to what you call the video. You say it's very average, a very mid show in your video. Do you want to talk about like what that means for you to say that like Hazbin Hotel is like an average mid show?
I would say the reason why I called it that was because like it was not as good as like the people who praised the show say it was, obviously, but it also was not as like bad as people said it was. But I didn't really think there were any like particularly good or particularly bad elements that like worked in the show's favor aside from a couple of plot points and maybe the songs. Like it's a deeply flawed show, and it kind of reminds me of when I did like a video essay on La La Land, the movie La La Land, a couple of years ago, which is another like heavily praised piece of work that has glaring flaws.
They're very divisive films. Like I am a fan of La La Land myself, and I am also able to say, yeah, there are a lot of problems, not just with the structure, but also again, moralistically with some of the representation and what it's suggesting about jazz culture through the eyes of a bunch of white people.
Right.
Yeah, I think for me that's why Hazbin Hotel and Hell of a Boss are so interesting, because yeah, like there's not enough in it for me to like completely hate the show. There are like these interesting elements in it that like kind of keep me coming back to like know like what's going on, like where is all of this heading, kind of stuff. But there's also like just some of the strangest like decisions I've ever seen in a show, like very conscious, like really specific, like why did you choose to do that? You know, whether it's Vivian or the writers or whoever's doing that particular thing is like, why did you choose to present this in that way? Because yeah, and because you mentioned the swearing first off, like that's kind of the thing that everybody talks about. I think it's a little bit overplayed, the commentary on the swearing myself, because it seems like that's all people kind of say about Hell of a Boss. Like, oh, they swear a lot, and it's like they really do, and I think it's annoying, but I think it's also like I think it takes more of like the credit of like the hate than maybe it deserves, because I think like there's so much other things to really dislike about the show than the
And
swearing.
like some of the characters can like curse excessively and get away with it. Like I mentioned Baggy in particular as someone who can get away with it because that just plays very well into her personality.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like just characters like cursing a lot just for like the sake of it, that's just causing it to like stick out a lot more, and
Yeah.
that's what's been like drawing a lot of ire.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I guess it's like, it's. I mean, again, it's hard to not sound like a stick in the mud. Be like, yo, what if everyone just swore all the time? Like it didn't mean anything. Like, what if we just outlawed the words or whatever? I don't like it's. But it really is like. It does really feel like it kind of takes things away. Like I remember when I first watched the pilot of Hazbin Hotel, I thought it was really strange that Charlie says fuck at the end of it. And I remember at the time thinking, like, well, like Charlie's supposed to be like this nice, polite person, yet she's swearing just as much as like anyone else. And it was
Yeah.
like confusing to me to be like, well, what is the message here? And this is still something I'm confused about with the series Hazbin Hotel. Is like what is considered good and like what is considered bad? Like what actually is a sin and what is not?
And like I found like the twist where it's like people and even people in heaven like didn't know exactly what that constituted as very interesting.
Right.
But I feel like that was downplayed to an extent, especially because, well, first of all, the revelation that Angel Dust's sister is not in hell. Angel Dust's sister that we have yet to meet, which I feel kind of like, because from the way the scene originally played out, I assumed, oh, so like bar Adam, like very few, if any, people have actually like made it to heaven.
Well, then they have like Serpentius gets to go to. Oh, sorry, we're spoiling all of the show. Just to
Yeah,
let everyone know,
spoilers.
spoilers throughout. Serpentius, the Snake Man, goes to heaven at the end of the show, and I guess the idea is that it's because he sacrificed himself. That's why he was able to go to heaven at the end. Which is like, okay, I guess that's one way you go to heaven is you show like selfishness
Yeah.
or
But also,
selflessness. Yeah.
like, given like a scene, there was a scene in episode 2 that like confused me of, excuse me, because since it's supposed to be like Charlie rehabilitating these sinners, and it just painted heaven as like that stereotypical like, don't do drugs, don't do sex before marriage.
But even then, it's like it feels even more confused than that. Like the scene where Angel Dust is in the bar with like his friends. Like it seemed like because the idea was that he was being tested and people were like watching him to see if he's like able to do it, right? Like what he's supposed to
Right.
do. And within these guidelines, it was like him like drinking was fine, but like if he did any kind of drug, that would be like too much. But like obsessive drinking seemed to be like fine, and it's like why is that considered okay and this is considered like worse? Shouldn't like both of them like the way it prioritizes like certain actions as like inherently a sin and other things as like just not a sin is one of the things I find most confusing and honestly most fascinating about Hazbin Hotel.
Yeah, and I can imagine someone could say like, oh, but like not even the people in heaven like know what counts as a sin and what doesn't. So like it makes sense that these would be like weighed very differently, but there's a difference between like that, just like not even like the people upstairs not even knowing like what gets someone to heaven, and just being confusing with like your morals or what is
Right,
and what
right.
isn't, like, sinful.
I would even argue, like, with that scene, like, even Charlie is like, don't go for the drugs, go for the alcohol. And she doesn't even know what is really, she has guesses. Like, the whole idea of a hotel is based on, like, what she thinks gets you into heaven, which I guess are all these kind of stereotypes. But then that leads to, if nobody knows how to get to heaven, then, like, what is the point of the show? Like, what are we supposed to take away from her actions in the hotel? Like, what
And
is
like
what is she supposed to do to bring these people to the good side or whatever?
and like what doesn't help is that like the least interesting part of Hazbin Hotel is the Hazbin Hotel.
It is,
Like,
yeah,
there's nothing really that goes on at the hotel that like piques my interest. We don't see like much of like what they do there aside from like some small exercises like the trust falls and everything.
and
But like
yeah,
by like the halfway point, most of the focus is just on like the other characters and their problems.
yeah. I that was always like really interesting to me too, because like it kind of feels like they wrote a show, or they came up with an idea, but then they spent all of their time thinking about how exciting it would be when like two characters got together and kissed, for example. Like it kind of feels like when you're talking to your friends about like you have this great idea, but you're always just kind of going back to this one scene in your head more than like any other part of what you're talking about with the story. Like it's clear like that's what you actually want to do, and everything else is kind of secondary to making this moment. And I feel like with Hazbin Hotel and also Hell of a Boss, those moments are these relationship moments. Like the plot seems like an excuse to make these dramatic relationship stories happen.
Yeah, like the scene in episode 8 with like Pentius and Sherry.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
that scene kind of it doesn't even like do much like in the long run, especially since like it was only like recently established, like 2 episodes ago established that
Hmm.
he had like any sort of feelings for her, because that was her first appearance in the series proper.
Yeah. And just so many problematic elements with that whole sequence too. Um, we've both talked about we've talked about this together. How the show is not great in its depictions and uh, sexual violence, let's say.
Yeah.
Um, and it's weird that you have to have a conversation like that about a show, especially like a cartoon show. Um, and again, I think the argument against what I am about to say is like, oh, it's an adult show, so it's dealing with adult themes, and it's like there's a difference between like dealing with adult themes and just having like an adult thing happen in
Yeah,
your
like
show.
Family Guy tried to do the adult
Yeah, you talk
themes,
about
and
this
that
in your yeah.
episode was heavily panned.
Yeah, you do this in your in your video. You talk about this comparison with Family Guy, and I kind of remember this episode. Like this episode does actually sound very familiar to me.
I actually think, like, if memory serves me right, it was actually like the Halloween special for that particular season, which makes it kind of
Ooh,
worse.
that is really weird. Yeah, because the idea is that like Quagmire gets hurt by autoerotic asphyxiation, like almost dies from autoerotic
Right.
asphyxiation, and then his sister comes in
New clown porn, that's the joke.
through a clown. Very funny. Wow, just knocking all the cultures. Clown porn is very strong. Proud fetish. Absolutely disgusting. Um, but anyway, let's yeah, let's kind of talk about because Family Guy's also a mature show. It's for adults only, but the way in which it presents domestic abuse is also like bad, right?
Yeah.
So how would you describe like what happens in something like Hazbin Hotel and Family Guy versus what could be considered a more nuanced or a more mature representation of the topic, while still attempting to be a comedy and to make humor out of these situations.
I would say that like a more nuanced take of the situation it has been was, well, the first big problem is that Angel Dust abuser Valentino was played for laughs up to that point.
Yes,
And but by then, by the time we first see him in episode 2, I knew about like episode 4 and like
which we'll definitely
scene
get to.
where
Yeah,
the scene where like Valentino physically assaults Angel Dust, and
yeah.
I was just like, I cannot find anything this man does funny. I can't laugh at him because I know that like he's just this terrible, terrible abuser.
And for me, it also like retroactively makes me not able to laugh at Angel Dust and all of his
Yeah.
like his pornographic, sexy jokes like, oh, I'm gonna suck your dick, and it's like, well, is he saying that because of this trauma? Like, if that's the case, then this isn't funny. This is like really sad, and I feel bad, like, you know, laughing at these jokes. And I think you pointed this out to me because I didn't even notice it when I first watched it, was that he himself kind of causes sexual harassment by showing his porn videos to people that didn't ask to see the porn videos,
Yeah.
which is fascinating, honestly, because that is a punchline. Like, that's a punchline. He does the same thing that Charlie takes her to like an S&M dungeon, the most unrealistic S&M dungeon ever. Basically, what Family Guy would have done if they showed that exact same scene. And then that's the jokes, like, oh, look at the sex. Look how uncomfortable people are looking at the sex. I guess that's the whole joke, right? Like, look how uncomfortable they are seeing the sex. That's the punchline.
Look how uncomfortable these people are at seeing BDSM.
I exactly, like, if I have a lot of controversial takes, obviously, on Vivzy Pop's work, but I feel like I really do feel like that Hazbin Hotel and Hell of a Boss to some degree are kind of like the um the liberal version of like far right comedy. And what I mean by that is that like far right comedy's entire like gag is trying to get people to be like, oh, that's so offensive. You wouldn't say that, And the joke is that you're laughing at an imaginary person being offended by the stupid jokes that these conservatives are saying. I feel like Hell of a Boss and Has-Been are that, but for like liberal, more progressive types. Let's say where the joke is that, oh, someone's going to be so mad that the sex thing is happening. Oh, they're such babies. That's going to be too much for somebody. That's going to be too adult. And that's why it's funny. Like, I feel like you have to kind of imagine an imaginary person in order to, like, really finish that punchline. Like, it doesn't seem like it makes sense on its own to laugh at it. You have to have some kind of larger perspective of like, oh god, kids, you can't show this to kids, you can't do that on television. Like, what do you think about that? Is there any merit to any of that? Or
I feel like there is at least like some merit to that because like part of like the appeal of Hazbin Hotel and Hell of a Boss by extension is just, oh, look at this very adult thing in this cartoon. Like, and I think it relies a lot on like the idea that there's that stereotype that animation's for kids.
Yeah.
Like, ooh, we can't do this on like kids cartoons. We're edgy.
Yep. No, I think that is absolutely the case. Um, Hold on, I'm just checking something really quick here.
All right.
Cool. Okay, just wanted to make sure everything was good on my end.
All
Um,
right.
yeah, so I absolutely agree with that, and I think like what you said about animation specifically is really apt here, because um, that is kind of like used as a shield a bit, where it's like, oh, you expect cartoons to be for kids, and here's a cartoon that's not for kids. The problem is me expecting a child's show when it's not a child's show, and I do feel like it uses that as like protection against criticism. When it's like, no, it doesn't matter if it's animated. Like, if a live action show did this, it would also be bad. Like
Yeah.
it, like I'm not pretending like I'm watching a kids show when I watch Hazbin Hotel. Like when com- I do compare it to a kids show, but that's just because of how it treats the subject matter. Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
And like currently, like I'm working my way through the 2018 TV series Heathers. That's because
right,
that's gonna be
right.
like my next video, and I've noticed that it has like a lot of parallels in how it like treats its content with like Hazbin Hotel,
Mm-hmm.
because it deals with like similar things like grooming and sexual assault and all that. And it's just like they aren't handling it with the tact that it needs to be. And there needs to be in these situations. It sounds like it's just there because it's an adult show, they can have it.
Yeah, and I think when people like, oh, this show isn't made for kids, kids aren't supposed to watch it, I just think that's honestly just not true. Like, there's
Yeah.
there's there's nothing in Hazbin Hotel or Hell of a Boss that is like un like
The
that
only
that that
thing that like
a kid
the
couldn't
only thing
yeah.
that even implies that it's for kids are like the YouTube kids content farms making content about it.
Yeah, like there's nothing a kid like can't understand about Hell of a Boss. Like, it has mature topics, but like a kid can absolutely follow everything that's happening in Hazbin Hotel. To me, it feels like like when I was a kid, we would this before like the internet. Um, oh wait, hold on. We're getting a comment. The stream is really quiet. Okay, let me see if I can fix that a little bit.
Hmm.
Wonder if that's on my end or not. Um,
Like I can turn my like mic up a little bit. Which way is the? Oh wait, it's already up.
oh, that might. Okay, I think I figured out the reason. You are turned down, so I'm okay.
Ah.
So I have turned you up considerably. So I think that. Hello, Jess. Thanks for letting us know in the chat.
Hello.
That's what's going on. Let me know if this is better. If this is better at all. So anyway, um, cool. Jess says it's better.
All right, that's good to
Cool.
know.
So, back in the day, like, before you could just go on the internet and stuff like that and watch anything, I remember going to my friend's house that had parents that didn't care if you watched South Park. Like,
Yeah.
every kid did that, even though South Park was, said only adults are supposed to watch it. Like, we watched the heck out of it and loved it because, at least in the beginning of South Park's run, it was nothing that, like, we couldn't understand or think is funny. It's all fart jokes and also a lot of swearing and all that other stuff going on. Like, I feel like Hazbin Hotel is only mature in that it has mature subject matter, but
It's
like
like that forbidden fruit.
exactly, like literally, like it's using the full heaven hell metaphor. This is like, oh, you're not supposed to talk about this. You're not supposed to joke about these things. You're not supposed to mention sex. Um, it's just really that's kind of it's the main argument of the show is that you're not supposed to mention sex, so we're gonna put a lot of sex into everything, whether we whether we even understand what sex is, like I don't want to. I don't accuse anyone on the team for being virgins or anything like that. I just for me it feels like when I see them talk about alcohol and drugs or have characters that are drunk and high, I it to me it feels like they don't know what that means or like what that action actually does to somebody.
But
Like
then, like, it can be hand waved by fans by saying, like, oh, it's okay. They're in hell. They can consume, like, copious amounts of alcohol or drugs because they're in hell.
or like they just say something that's so clearly like they don't know what they're talking about when it comes to alcohol and drugs. Like a friend of mine pointed this out because I totally missed this. That Angel Dust asks for like money or that he's like broke, and he says like, "What? Crack is expensive." It's like crack, the drug known for being really cheap, and that's why people get it. Like what? What are you talking about?
Yeah, like, I. Like, it might. I feel like part of that might be, like, stemming because I know crack tends to carry with it, at least, like, during the height of the war on drugs, a harsher sentence than proper cocaine, but that was due to, like, socioeconomic factors.
No, like, and that's not
To
even
say
like,
the
if you
very
went to a
least.
drug dealer to buy crack, it was because it was the cheap alternative to cocaine. That's why people bought it in droves. But like, just saying like crack is expensive, it just feels like you could put any drug there, and it would be like the same thing to you as the writer. Like, oh, crack, angel dust, cocaine. These are basically the same things, right? Heroin, basically, that's like crack but bigger or something. Like the ultimate example of this, and I didn't end up talking about this in my Hell of a Boss video, but there's a moment where there's a flashback of Stolas remembering the first time he met Blitz, and
Right.
there's this moment where he's in this ballroom for some gala event, and his wife is saying shit about him like she always does, and he goes to one of the imp waitresses and asks her, "What's the strongest thing you have?" And she says, "Absinthe." And I'm like, what? That's like the ultimate like freshman in college answer to like what's the strongest alcohol.
It's that green fairy, you see? It's that green fairy that makes you see all the wacky doos.
Also, like, why they're in hell? Why not just have like crazy hell drugs? Why not have like, I don't know, dragon cocaine or something? Like,
Or
just
why not drink just pure ethanol?
Yeah, or just like, yeah, like this is the water of the teat of Satan or whatever. Just some weird mystical thing. Then you wouldn't have to deal with this problem. Just make up some crazy. Why are they doing real world drugs in hell? They should just be doing crazy stuff. That'd be more fun. Be a lot more fun to see them do stuff like that. So they're just doing absinthe like a child. Or
Yeah, and actually, like, funny story. Like, I'm starting like a D&D campaign like soon with my boyfriend and a couple of other friends. And last week we were starting to like, talk about what kind of game we wanted to play. And my boyfriend says, "Oh yeah, I want to be like this like cat character who's just like a stoner and just wants to find good vibes." So we just like kept trying to find like ways to like, incorporate that into like the lore of like the world we're building. And we decided that like he would be like a stoner who uses a lot of catnip because
that's fun.
He's a cat and that's funny.
But that like makes sense, right? Because that's the old joke, like, oh, the catnip is like their drug, their weed or whatever. But like, how drugs and alcohol work in Vivsy Pop's world, it just really feels like they're just not that familiar with the topic. Like, not saying that
it's like how a dare agent assumes drugs work.
Yes, exactly. Like, oh, don't smoke the weed. That'll get you. It's we have a comment coming in. Jess says, There in Hell is used as an excuse for every bit of bad writing, and it's so annoying. I agree with that. That
Yes.
is one of my big problems with the show is that anytime somebody does something bad or like despicable when it comes to a character, it's like, oh, they're hell. They're supposed to be bad people, and it's like, okay, but I'm supposed to be watching interesting characters. Like I
Yeah, and
want
like
to
we're supposed to
follow.
be like rooting for these people. So like shouldn't they give us like something that we can sympathize them with?
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah,
like not like terribly maimed like Angel Dust's whole domestic abuse situation.
yeah. That's so like that song. That's like the big song from the show in that episode, Poison, right? Where he's like singing this pop banger about like his horrible life, basically, and it's I don't know how I'm supposed to respond to that video. Like, am I supposed to think this is sexy? Am I supposed to think this is really tragic? Because I know that like a lot of times when I see clips of that, like a lot of the thumbnails that fans make are very sexually provocative. Like this is a hot and sexy video to watch, and I just that tonally that just seems so confused. And I think the show
Yeah.
is confused itself on how to express that.
Yeah, like it wants to have these very serious scenes. It wants to be able to like discuss those issues with tact. It just doesn't know how to do it properly.
You know, and after that scene in that episode, it's just kind of gone. You know, like we don't really touch too much on that. Again, we kind of move on to some
Like
other
the one
problems.
time we like discuss it, like after that is like episode 6, and even then, like that was after like a 5-month time skip,
Yeah,
and Angel just like told Valentino off for like almost doing something to Nifty. I don't quite remember
that
what
was
it
when they were
was.
all in the bar together.
Yeah.
Yeah. That whole sequence is so bizarre to me because like
Oh yeah, and that was also like the scene where Serpentius got like essayed, and that was like played completely for laughs.
yeah, it's again like the show is basically saying, okay, this horrible thing, now's the time to laugh at it. This same horrible thing, now's the time to be shocked and sad by it. It's not the only consistency is the show just decides, okay, it's funny now and it's not funny here. We're not going to tell you why it's funny now versus why it's not funny there. We're just going to tell you through visual cues and just straight up just saying, be sad now for Angel Dust.
Yeah.
It's I mean and that's why it's fascinating to me. Like that like how your mind as a creator has to kind of work in order to fit all of that together, and also to be like a huge fan of the show as many people are. I mean, this is a huge success of a program. Like you're also doing those things and saying that to yourself. This is all great. I loved everything. All of the essay jokes that Angel Dust did, I love that. Angel Dust now being sad because I've learned that he's been abused his whole life, also great. These are both amazing things. The next time he does another sex joke after this moment, also funny to me. It's all like that's what's so not to try to like diagnose or like try to understand people, but I do have like an empathy or a desire to like understand like what people are thinking. And it's like I try to process like what am I supposed to be getting out of Hazbin Hotel, you know?
And like and like going back to like the topic of Family Guy, like love Quagmire or not, he's at least like tonally consistent.
Yeah.
Because like Angel Dust, he's like someone who is like his joke is that he's basically like a serial rapist.
Yeah, that's his entire character.
But he's played like consistently enough to where we aren't really like confused by his like motivations or anything.
Mm-hmm. And it is played like very ridiculously. I do think looking back, a lot of the humor does kind of come from thinking that this isn't something like common. You know, like the idea of a character like Quagmire supposed to be kind of so outrageous to us that we'd be like, oh, what a crazy thing. Good thing we don't have people like Quagmire. But then you get older and realize, no, that's actually so many people out there like Quagmire, and it stops being funny because like, oh wow, there's Quagmires just all over. It's the same with like the pedophile old man character. There's so many pedophiles that are main characters in Family Guy.
It is.
Like it's the same thing. We're like, oh well, obviously, like pedophiles are so rare and just never happens. That's what makes this magical creature funny. And it's like, no, this is just
like it's still bad,
yeah.
but at least they're consistent about it.
Yeah, and it's not like the show is condoning it. Like it's very clearly like, even as a joke, you're supposed to be, yeah, you're not supposed to do that.
Yeah.
But I mean, even then, it would be nice if Quagmire got some little bit more comeuppance in his life. I remember there's a meme going around where they're passing around the footage of Quagmire cussing out Brian for not like wanting to be his friend or whatever, that famous speech. And everyone's like, and I saw a quote tweet of that where it's like, why didn't Brian just like call Quagmire a rapist pedophile? He's like, you know what? You're not wrong. Why didn't Brian just say that?
Both genuinely terrible people.
Yeah, like it's. I feel like, and I really do feel like that's kind of shows how a lot of these, at least something like Family Guy, is so like made by like cis straight white men, where like they don't live in a reality where these are like things to kind of think about. These are things you see in like stories and on CSI maybe, but they don't really exist kind of beyond that. So something that's terrifying to a marginalized population, whether it's women or, you know, black people or anything like that, it's like not something they think about too much, you know.
Yeah.
Hold on 1 second.
All right.
We have a comment from somebody named ADS.
Oh, that's my boyfriend.
Okay. Because it said, she just can't stop talking about Quagmire from Family Guy, huh? I really wanted to make sure that wasn't like somebody mean.
That was not meant to be like a trollish comment.
Okay,
He's just...
I just really wanted to just make... Okay, you're... I was reading like, oh no, is this like somebody coming in to harass us? No, you're cool then, ADS. Say hello to Flower's boyfriend, everyone.
Hello.
You can't. I guess you talk about Quagmire a lot. Is that your celebrity crush, Quag?
No, like we put like Family Guy on sometimes. It's just kind of like white noise whenever we're doing like other things.
It is good for that. I mean, a lot of the new stuff though is so like unwatchable to me. It's so hard. Like I feel like they're just, guys, like everyone just seems like, even the cartoon characters like feel like they don't want to be there. You know, it's like they all are just like monotone, like this is the punchline is we didn't want to write this joke or whatever it is. It just feels so sad. Everyone's saying hello to your boyfriend in the chat. Great time to remember that super chats are turned on. So if you feel like donating to the show, if you like what you see, please show your support. I also have a Patreon at madelinemaye, so we can look at that as well.
Yeah.
And
give her your money. Give her your money.
You have a Patreon as well, right?
I do.
So also give Flower money.
Yeah, also give me money.
Yeah, but I think there is like a connection, because you said that Vivian loves Family Guy.
Right.
Is that something that she said in like an interview or something like that? Or what is that? I'm just curious about that information.
I know she mentioned it somewhere. Let me see if I can find like the exact quote.
Because I just think anyone.
But I do remember in like her I do remember like in her thank you post, like after the Hazbin Hotel pilot reached like a bajillion views, she used that like popular like transparent image of Peter Griffin wearing the gold suit to show like the options. Like, oh, we can like kickstart it. We can like bring it to. A lot of these are just like the scene if it's written by Viv. Let me see.
Yeah, the swearing.
Yeah.
Anyone who says their favorite show is Family Guy is fascinating to me.
I mean, Family Guy is also just like a fascinating show.
It really is. It is Gen Z's version of The Simpsons, for better or worse.
Yeah.
How do we feel, chat? How do we feel about Family Guy? I think the first couple seasons are pretty good. I think before the cancellation, I think those first couple seasons are very funny.
And like it has like occasionally does have like those episodes that are actually pretty good.
You know what? I find myself like enjoying American Dad episodes more. I feel like that's a more consistent show than Family Guy is at this point. And there have been some American Dads that I've really, really liked. But Family Guy, I feel like just sometimes I'm watching like a funeral procession. Like it's just so slow and so drawn out. They're trying to get me to like turn off the phone and fall asleep. Like, what am I? But if we can't find it, we can't find it. But I was just curious about that.
Yeah, because I'm pretty sure she said it like somewhere. It's just
again, like I'm not doubting you. This isn't like fucking prove it kind of stuff. It's I was just curious, but we got a comment here. Lucas from the comments says, Family Guy is fascinating to me because it's such an American thing. Like, I'm European and big American shows like Breaking Bad are still watched here, but no one cares about Family Guy over here. I think that's more of because of the American humor is just different from other, like, that idea that American humor doesn't translate as well overseas.
I mean, there are jokes in like Family Guy that are like very, very American centric. Like, especially on a show that's like so pop culture heavy, like Family Guy, the humor does not translate over like as well.
And I feel like that'd be the same, like if we were to watch like a show from Britain or Germany that's really based in like their pop culture, that wouldn't make like any sense to us as Americans.
Yeah.
So, but that is very interesting. So another thing that you touch on in your Hazbin Hotel video is the character designs, and some of the problems in maybe diversity of body type. Why don't you elaborate a little bit on that?
Well, a lot of like the main characters are like thin and pale. And like despite the fact that like we're told like, oh, this character had this ethnicity back when they were alive. It's like we're not really like showed anything that could really like hint to that. We're mostly just supposed to take your word for it. Especially because I touched a lot on Alistair because Alistair originally was like from South Louisiana, which is where I currently live. And he the backstory Viv had and has in mind for like Alistair, that would not be possible for him. Because Louisiana was like notoriously racist at the time, a lot more so than it is now. And it just would there was no way like he could have gotten away with like what was it like being a radio host while moonlighting as a serial killer. It just he would have been caught like immediately.
And just being a black radio host in Louisiana was also just impossible for his
Yes,
era.
it was also impossible, and there's at least a full decade between like the time Alistair died and the time Louisiana's first black radio DJ did actually like come into view.
Yeah, there does kind of seem to be this racial washing in Hazbin Hotel, where it's either like you said, race is just kind of like this background thing or just not expressed, but not in a way that's progressive, but in a way that just everyone just looks white and sounds white in the show.
Yeah.
Except I guess Keith David, because it's Keith David. But
yeah, Keith David the cat.
Yeah, and even then, like it looks like it's just another white guy. You only know, because Keith David is a black man. That's how you know. But otherwise, like the character themselves could be literally any ethnicity. Like we just have no idea.
And like I remember after like I finished up the Hazbin video, I read somewhere that Viv was at the very least considering that Nifty was Japanese in origin.
Yeah, I read something
similar.
But
that was because like her pilot voice actress spoke Japanese even though she was a white woman. Which raised an eyebrow to me because like now she's voiced by like Kimiko Glenn, right? Who is Japanese.
So it could still happen, but it does kind of
it could still happen, but like the original context in which it like developed is not necessarily good.
It kind of sounds like Vivian is just being like, "Oh, you have that skill and that background. Let's put that in." Like not really thinking too hard about like the implications of this. He's like, "Oh, wouldn't it be fun if you were Japanese because you can speak Japanese?" Or, not thinking about whether a white person should have a character like that in the show. Yeah, a lot of Vivian's ideas, and this is why I think why I really get frustrated by like people that add canon in things like Twitter and like social media posts, because they really all do have like the energy of, oh, I had this really exciting thought and I'm going to make that canon right now, instead of like taking the time to like think maybe that's not the best idea. Like it's too close of like a message from like your brain to like your mouth or your hands typing something up.
Yeah, and like and in cases like writing for Hazbin Hotel, a show like Hazbin Hotel, having that kind of like quick writing sense is not necessarily the best thing. It's especially since like they've only like released the episodes this year. They've had like a lot of time to really like flesh out the backgrounds of these characters and kind of think like, oh, okay, so like if we're gonna like make this character this background, what should we do to like show that, if anything?
Yeah, and cartoons take forever to make. Like they take a year, sometimes more per episode, to make this program. So like to just add things in, all kind of willy nilly like that, like really quick. It's like it's not, you can't really do that with cartoons because like it kind of reminds me of like these stories of like producers on like The Simpsons would tell them to do something like, oh, have them say that, and they'd be like, we can't do that, we've already shot and animated, and they're like, just figure it out. So they would put in like a blank frame of someone looking away or something like that, so they could put in this line that the producer said they had to have, or whatever, because that's the only way you can do it. Like it's very strange to like just be so like, oh, this is what it is, maybe it's that, maybe it's this, when you're working on something that takes like a year to produce.
Yeah, like animation is like, it's like, to me it's kind of like a ballet. It's like one of those things you have to like carefully choreograph before like you can actually execute it. Otherwise it's just gonna look messy.
Yeah, and Hazbin Hotel is a storyboard focused show. From what I understand, it's so you have to kind of write all those things in, design all of those things. That reminds me of another thing that you talk about in your video. The lack of in-betweeners in the animation. Explain to the audience what in-betweeners are and why that matters for Hazbin Hotel.
So basically, in-betweeners are like the people who animate between the main storyboard frames. So like, you know how like in animatics you don't really have that much like movement in them? Well, and like if there is, it's like stilted. Doesn't look like, like they're actually moving. That's because like in between those frames, that's when like other people come in and animate it to make it look like they actually are moving. They actually are like doing these things. But with Hazbin Hotel, there is a weird lack of them that kind of just made it where some frames just looked missing, some of them just looked choppy. It gave me kind of like a motion sickness headache from like watching it.
Yeah, it does seem like a cost-cutting measure because in-betweening has always been seen as like grunt work, like something to be either like shipped off to another country to do, or something that you like the lowest level employee at the animation studio does.
Yeah.
And
because like that's not the fun thing to do. You want to always do like the main frames.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, even though in-betweening is, like you said, really important, especially for motion to happen. I really
if you compare like the animation from like the pilot of Hazbin to like the episodes that were released on Amazon Prime, you can see like that difference because in the pilot, Viv essentially kind of had to be her own in-betweener, and that resulted in, even though like the character models weren't necessarily consistent, the animation was very fluid.
Also, just really quick, your camera's kind of out of focus.
Crap, it's doing the thing.
I think because when you moved, I think it got a little bit out of focus. I don't know if that's something you can do, but no worries. Oh, there it goes. It just went. Now it's good. Now it looks good.
Yay!
Okay. Cool. The water is always good for you. It's also very good for your camera. I find that really interesting because even like the Hell of a Boss episodes do look good because they do the in-between work in that, while Hazbin Hotel, whether it's Bento Box, I believe is one of the studios that works on it, whoever's deciding to not put in these keyframes makes a show that, like you said, is kind of jarring. Like, I remember specifically the song fight training thing between Vaggie and
the one where there was like so much wrong I couldn't even like list it all.
That hurt my brain to like. I did feel like I was getting car sick. Like you mentioned, it felt really like what is happening? From shot to shot. Like my criticism of Vivian's work has always been that everything is like super messy, but like you do see that like when you don't have even proper just in betweening, like you said, it just really exacerbates like how like much is going on and like how there's just too much visual information on the screen at any one time.
Yeah, and like another issue of like having all of that visual information was like the color contrasting.
This blew my mind when you showed me this. I thought this was fascinating. Explain this this grayscaling thing that you're talking about.
So, I saw like a tweet from this person. They have since like deleted like the thread proper because I imagine it was because of like harassment from Viv fans or whatever, and I don't want to draw any more ire to them, so I'm not going to name them by name.
Famously normal, great, compassionate.
Yeah, famously normal behavior.
they famously love the detractors. Say agree to disagree. Your opinions are your own. Never have anything bad to say.
But they took a frame from Lucifer's song in episode 5,
Mm-hmm.
blurred it, and like grayscaled it to show that like a lack of contrast between these frames. And I kind of realized like, even though some people are saying like, oh well, if you blur it, of course you're not gonna really like see it, right? But it's like that wasn't the issue. The issue is that there are so few colors that it just kind of like blends into each other. And this is like when I mentioned Viv's love of Family Guy and how they
Mm-hmm.
actually did the color contrasting a lot better.
You know what that reminds me of is I watched the College Humor game show actually a lot. And one of the rounds they have is the pixelation round, where they have a pixelated image of something. You're supposed to guess what the scene is, and it's usually like some famous scene from a movie or whatever. And like each round, the pixelation gets a little bit better, and like on some of them, like you can actually like tell what it is by the most pixelated version. And I think that's just because of that contrast between like colors, between like everything else around it. So even like in its most distorted version, you can be like, "Oh, I know what's going on there." Versus something like Hazbin Hotel, where everything is just a glorious washed out mess.
Yeah. And like it's just way too bright and like it just even like if you don't really consider like oh you can't really see it if you blur it or whatever, it's just uncomfortable to look at because I remember I showed you like some of the grayscaling I
Mm-hmm.
did for that segment and you said oh the show actually looks a lot better when it's grayscaled.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's so much, there's too much color. If anything, and has been like getting rid of that. It's like this actually looks okay. Like this, I could almost follow it. But then you show me the Family Guy, and that's when I really see like, oh my god, yeah, now I can definitely see the difference. Like this, you can just tell this is Peter, this is the background, which might,
Yeah, you can
yeah.
tell like this is Meg, this is Stewie. The background is like a completely different color.
Mm-hmm. Oh, here's Lucas has an interesting comment. He says, similarly, a few years ago, I made bead plates of a lot of the Has-Been characters, and it looks nothing like them. Uh, because, you know, like, you can't represent them through low pixels. Like, you've seen
Yeah.
those famous pictures of, like, 1 pixel art where it's like, oh, that's the Simpsons, that's whoever. You really
Yeah.
can't do that with the Has-Been characters because there's too many colors. There's too many details.
Yeah.
I think what Vivian, I truly believe Vivian is the most, for better or worse, the most important creator of her generation. She kind of carved out a path for indie animators, at least on YouTube, to kind of make the stuff that they want. And I think her biggest contribution was figuring out how to make the, for lack of a better word, deviant art style into something commercial and can be put into a story. Because a lot of her style is what we kind of commonly associate with the idea of like the OC, of like the original character, of something that's like very so personalized that it becomes like too much even into of itself. We used to the variant grading was kind of the joke that we always had, where they would use like a whatever kind of mix, and I feel like that's something that Vivian really was able to figure out, is how to put that kind of over detailed style into a work.
Yeah, like part of me can like imagine just like Charlie's figure or Value's figure just being like a base on like some DeviantArt profile, like just it's like one of those things where it's like, oh lord, I forgot like what exactly it's called, but you know like those like character bases you can find on DeviantArt
Oh
where you
yeah,
can just like throw whatever you want over it.
it's
It's kind of
there,
like that.
there's a lot of that in the Brony community back when I was doing that with My Little Pony. Everyone had the same pony thing, and they just did whatever they wanted. Um, adopt
Adoptables.
okay,
Thank you, Luke.
Adoptables, yes. And that's such a fascinating concept where it's like you have these characters that are so highly detailed, so many aspects to them, and you put them like next to buildings and other things that are also very complicated. And to me it kind of has the effect of like a Picasso painting or like an impressionist painting where it's hard to like know what I'm supposed to look at. I got I got in trouble for not immediately recognizing that the character of Sally Mae in Hell of a Boss was trans because apparently I was supposed to recognize that male imps and female imps had gendered body parts and gendered colors, that they had different sizes of their rings and hair. And it's like everything looks insane in a Vivzy Pop cartoon. How am I supposed to recognize that this slight difference in insanity is supposed to be important when I don't know what's important? Everything is just so macro.
Yeah, and like and I remember I saw that episode too, and if I did not know like the differences between like male imps and female imps, in particular with their horns, I probably wouldn't have been able to guess that Sally Mae was transgender.
Yeah. I didn't know until someone explained it to me later because I found out that they were trans through a Wikipedia article about something else that I was talking about. And I recorded the video with that, and then after I finished the recording, I was talking to someone about like, yeah, how you're supposed to know this character's trans? Like, oh, the horns are different. I'm like, what? Oh yeah, the males have thick white rings, and the girls have thin white rings, and it's like, I lost it. I lost it on that Discord call between me and my friends. Like I was just like, my spirit left my body. I just could not believe what I was hearing. And then when I found out later that there was a second gendered aspect, that they also have different colored hairs, I just couldn't. Like they're double gendered. They're double gendered. And it's like, how, unless somebody tells you that's what you're supposed to look for, like how would you know? Because the show itself still like hasn't just said that Sally Mae is trans. We only know that because of this weird gendered lore thing that you have to look up, and because it was tweeted. I wonder if the character Sally Mae would be important at all if that information wasn't kind of put onto her like after the fact.
That is like a good point. And like actually, I do remember reading somewhere from like regarding to season 2 episode of Hell of Boss. I might be talking out of my ass here. I do not 100% remember this. But there was supposed to be like a trans male imp as well, and like just like in the background of one of the episodes.
There is something like that, but again, you only know that because you have to know this gender. Basically, they're clockable, is what it's saying. Yeah, they're clockable as trans. That's how you know they're trans, which I love. We love to see it.
Yeah, that has its own problems.
That's so cool. That we know they're trans because they look trans. That's how we know they're trans, because they look like they're trans. Very cool.
Thanks, Viv. Very cool.
No trans characters in Hazbin Hotel, though, as far as I'm aware, right? Or
right.
Okay.
And from like this whole conversation, it's kind of like scaring me to see like how Viv et al. Would like incorporate a trans character into Hazbin Hotel.
Yeah, especially since I know how the Sally Mae character has been represented in some extraneous material.
Yeah.
Let's call it, I believe philosophers call it paratext.
Yes.
Merchandise.
Let's leave it at that. Let's leave it at the paratext.
Let's call it paratext. But that is really interesting, because if characters like Angel Dust are being very hypersexual, then when they do have a trans character, will that character also be hypersexual like many of the characters are? And how will that character use their hypersexuality? And that's, again, there's no one right or wrong way to be trans, but it's also like, we do have an unfortunate stereotype placed on us, especially for trans women, that like a certain thing is a certain thing, does a certain thing. And, if that's the only trans character, that kind of trans character is the only trans character that shows up in Hazbin Hotel, that's not great. That wouldn't be cool. Put more trans characters. I guess that's my answer to that. Have multiple trans characters, then you won't have this problem. Then you can have as many sexy gridlock trans women.
I feel like part of like I feel like that's also part of the issue with like Angel Dust character, because he's the only like canonically like gay character in Hazbin Hotel. And like he's this hyper sexualized person with a troubled backstory. And that just has like unfortunate implications when not like, balanced out.
And Alistair is supposed to be Ace, which again I only knew through secondary information, and they only have one very confusing line towards the end of the show that suggests that he's Ace by using a phrase I've never heard of in my entire life to describe an Ace person. Where the zombie, not that zombie, the lady that has the cannibals. What's her name?
Rosie,
yeah, who's the queen of the cannibals or whatever. She says some line about Alistair being an old ace in the hole, and we're supposed to gather that he's Ace from that line, when it's like, I've never heard that phrase used in that way ever, and I consider myself on the Ace spectrum. I just what? And he even like responds to it very confusedly. So it's like, of course there's so many ships of Alistair, like just having sex with every other character in the show, because like, how would you know that the character's Ace? Because it's such extra information, and that's what's confusing, because there's so much just like extra information that's take it or leave it about Hazbin Hotel.
Like, I could probably name like all of the sexualities of like the main characters, but it's like, at which point does like that become relevant?
Yes, exactly.
Where does like why do we need to know this? Can't this like just be implied at this point?
Well, it's also like how it's kind of like brought in to these stories. I am still so confused about like what the consensus around queer characters are in Hell, because sometimes it seems like everyone is queer in Hell, and then sometimes it's like a few people are like really homophobic, and it's like, but it's like Hell, like I don't get it. Like, why? I guess you could say if you're homophobic, you go to hell. But also, the other implication that the implication of queer people being in hell in general is honestly extremely, extremely sus, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But the show doesn't really, like, clarify any of this. Like, I remember in the pilot for Hazbin Hotel, there was, like, a line where like one of the newscasters talking about Angel Dust, like, oh, he's a famous gay porn star, and the girl newscaster is like, oh, you would know that. I'm like, it's fucking Hell. Everyone just looking at porn and just whatever, like just queer and gay shit all the time. Like, I don't understand.
It's okay, they're in hell.
Yeah, I guess it's okay. You're right. I'm sorry, I forgot that they were in hell. I think that argument's so funny to me, because like,
I know it is.
I make the most extreme example of it in my video, where I say, well, what happens when they meet a white supremacist and they just start saying racist stuff? Is that okay because he's in hell? Like, that character is in hell, so he's like allowed to just do that? Are you going to use that same argument when it's something like that's actively like obviously bad? Like, no, hell isn't real. Hell's made up. These aren't real people. It's like when people were mad at me for like saying Sally Mae was a bad trans character, which I still believe. And like, Sally Mae doesn't owe you transness. Sally Mae doesn't have to tell you what her identity is. And like, Sally Mae's not real. Sally Mae's a cartoon character. It's a fiction. She's not real. If she was real, I would say yes. She absolutely doesn't owe me anything, but she's not. She's not real. And you don't. And you
such an unhinged argument too.
It's so crazy. It's like, and you don't even care. You only care because she's trans. So when you say she doesn't owe me transness, this is a completely hypothetical conversation because we already know she's trans. That's why we're having the conversation, because we've established that's happening. That's why we care about the character. It's just like it's hard. It makes my brain explode, honestly.
It kind of gives me like the same vibes as someone like saying, just like hypothetically, like, oh, Alistair doesn't like owe you asexuality.
Yeah.
And it's just like, well, when was that like even really like relevant in the show to begin with? Literally, like, aside from like the line with Rosie, the one line I can think of is just Alistair laughing off Angel Dust doing a sexual harassment.
Which I think anybody, ace or not, would probably respond the same way.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not here to judge anybody, but I feel like that's a common response. Do you want sex? No. Okay. Wow, you must be ace. I hate to bring up the J.K. Rowling word, but it is very Dumbledore's gay to me. It's a very similar kind of idea. And I am sure people back then were like, oh, Dumbledore doesn't owe you gayness. I'm sure people said shit like that when that was making the rounds before everyone hated J.K. Rowling because she's a monster. It's like, well, no, here's kind of how I think about it. If you don't specify the sexuality, the gender, the identity of a character, you are leaving space for people who disagree and hate that identity to watch your program, to watch your show.
Right.
So if Sally Mae is only trans through extraneous information, then you are allowing transphobic people to enjoy your show. That's honestly my final thoughts on it, which is why it's important to say these things like openly, so there's no debate whatsoever. Like, I got a lot of transphobic comments on my Hell of a Boss video by fans of Hell of a Boss, and I'm like, do you know there's a trans character on this show? I'm like, oh yeah, but it's whatever. Because it's only 5 seconds, and it's not like an active thing that they have to think about. And I feel like that's bad. To me, that feels like it's pandering to an audience that, I don't know,
should not necessarily like be able to be comfortable watching the show.
Yeah, to me it feels like you just want so many views. Like, you want everyone to watch what you're watching, and you're just so scared that you're gonna lose 5 million douchebags if you like really clarify something. Like, I don't understand, honestly, the mentality behind that, except like money. I don't know why else you would not just be like, characters trans, they're out and proud, have a pride flag or something. I don't think she.
Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to sell like their million Moxie keychains.
Yeah, or their Sally Mae
paratext.
Yeah, paratext. I know that the voice actress for Sally Mae likes that stuff and likes that they have that paratext added to them, which is, everyone has their own kind of way of seeing things. My problem is that it's the only trans character in the show, and it's the only representation of a trans character in the show. You can have the out and proud paratext trans character, but also show the one that's not just the stereotypes. Because we can be the stereotypes and also not be the stereotypes. Yeah.
Yeah, show one that's out and proud but doesn't want to paratext.
Yeah, maybe some of us don't want to paratext when we go outside. Paratext is the new way I'm describing this concept.
Yeah, same. We should just call it like paratext from now on.
Paratext. God, this skirt's a little too paratext on me. It's a little tight. It's a little paratext. Let's try something else on.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Anyway, so we got 35 minutes. I know you said you were going to be on for a couple of hours. So I think we have another half hour. Anything specific you want to talk about? Because I've been kind of asking all the questions. If there's anything you want to bring up about Hazbin Hotel or Vivzy Pop in general.
I mean, nothing like in particular like comes to mind immediately. I do remember like the one comment I got on the video that like piqued a bit of interest in me was one talking about like the lore. Like the comment was about like the myth told at the intro is literally just the foundation myth of modern Satanism and Luciferianism, and I didn't like talk about the lore of hell in general in Hazbin Hotel because that's not the point. The point is not to like have like a depiction of like Satanism lore, whether it's accurate or not.
Yeah. That's a really interesting point because I got a lot of similar comments on my Hell of a Boss video. Basically using the Bible as a reference, which again, like, hell isn't real. They could do this however they want. And two, like, the Bible is very specific about some very bad things. Like, do you really want to say that like Hell of a Boss is following like this belief in the Bible or this interpretation of the Bible? You know, especially like from what I understand about Vivian Madrano's upbringing, which was very conservative Christian. You know, like, do we want like that concept, even if we're parodying it, even if we're like trying to make some kind of, you know, satire or whatever of it, like, do we really want to ask ourselves like why these characters are like really in hell? You know?
Yeah.
Like, I pointed out that like in the lust dimension or the lust layer of hell and Hell of a Boss, there is a club that's all just pure sex and lust, but you can't go in without a partner. And it's like a monogamous partner. Like, Blitz tries to go in, and they're like, "Sorry, you can't go in. It's couples only." It's like, well, couldn't he just say?
That's like so weird because
Yeah.
like if it's meant to be like that like debaucherous or whatever, then like why not invite single people in?
Yeah, like, just, I'm really horny. I want to just have sex with everything. You know? And I guess the show later shows that they're kind of hypocrites because they do actually love each other. The Fizz and the other guy. But it also just again it kind of like confuses like a Christian worldview, as said in religion, and also just like a casual Christian worldview that people just tend to have in general because we're raised in a very Christian centric nation. And
Yeah.
I find that to be kind of fascinating because it's hard to know like what Vivian just assumes is quote unquote normal or real versus like what she's actually commentating on. Again, I kind of talk about like the alcohol versus drugs. That definitely sounds like a dare conversation to me. That alcohol is okay, but the drugs are not, kind of thing. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, you have it right because it does feel like it has that like worldview of like what we're taught, like you know, as kids in a Christian centric like nation like this. What is right? What is wrong? Like alcohol's okay, drugs are bad. Waiting until marriage to have sex is okay. Polyamory is bad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does. It does say something that all of the relationships that we see in both of these shows are monogamous.
Monogamous.
Yeah, monogamous between two people, and like, yeah, the way in which like the characters that are like monogamous behave, it's like this very, don't know. It feels really hetero, even when it is like gay characters, like engaging in it.
Yeah, like I know I said it in my video, but like Vaggie just seemed more like Charlie's tired business partner
Yeah.
a lot of the time than like an actual couple.
No, until like the very end, we really just don't get that. To me, it feels like that typical, like, Yuri manga depiction of like the business tycoon and the assistant who like longs after her, and they're like they share glances, and that's as much Yuri as you get. And in the comic, it really has that feel. I've heard accusations that Vivian Madrano is a fujoshi, I believe is how you say it. I don't know if that's true or not, but I do kind of see where people get that idea from, because she does seem to really, really like male on male romance to a point that is interesting, I guess we can say.
And and like in both like Husband and Hello Boss, like the most like I guess sexually free character. I guess that's the best way I can put it. Like Blitz and Angel Dust, who aren't really like in those monogamous relationships and just kind of like sleep around more often. They're the ones who are like the most broken according to the show.
Yeah, and it's also like the male characters are the ones that are so like much more sexually active and promiscuous than the woman character. Even like some of the women characters who are like openly promiscuous. I'm thinking of the flapper girl that shows up at the hotel. What's her name? Mimsy, or Verosica, the succubus in Hell of a Boss, are kind of like punished for being promiscuous women, in a way. And I mean, yeah, I feel like, again, that does feel like unexamined, like, Christian morality that we just kind of all have. Even me, who didn't really grow up in a conservative area, but that's just how that thing we all kind of have if we don't think about it.
Yeah, it's like just one of those things that's just like ingrained in you if you live in the US.
Yeah. And like we just don't think about it. Like I think it's kind of like the sexual assault jokes. Like as sexy and kinky and fetishy as a show is, it doesn't really seem to like sex, if that makes sense.
It's kind of like that what's the name of that trope, like sex is evil and I am horny?
Is that a TV tropes?
Yeah.
That's interesting. What does that mean? I've actually never heard that before.
It's kind of like the best way to describe it is like it's that duality between like, thinking that sex is evil, thinking that sex is like the devil's thing, but also experiencing lust and sexual attraction. And like Sorry, I'm thinking a little bit.
So I'm trying to think about, because I get what I get what you're saying, but maybe this is a way to think about it. My friend Chris, friend of the show, and just my friend in general, talked about how he had a friend who was Ace Arrow, like 100%, all that stuff, and that they were a huge fan of Hell of a Boss and Hazbin Hotel. It was like one of their favorite shows of all time. And Chris asked me, well, how do you square that? If it's supposed to be a kink fetishy show, why would my friend who's appalled by all of those things really, really like the show? And I was thinking about it, and it's like, well, the show itself is kind of asero about sex also. You know, it's also kind of like sex is kind of bad and gross, even though it has a lot of it. It feels like so separated, you know? Like,
It's not like a sex positive show.
yeah, it just has
Cause,
sex.
cause like the characters who are like the most objectively good in both like Hello Boss and Hazbin Hotel are in those monogamous relationships
Yeah.
that are like, based on love instead of lust or anything else.
Yeah, we don't see like the S&M character in like a normal conversation. You know, we see
Yeah.
as a punchline in the middle of the thing. You're supposed to be like, oh, you're supposed to react like Charlie, like, oh, that's so weird and gross. But also, I guess think like, oh, I bet other people are grossed out about this S&M thing that I totally do. It feels like it's made by people that are like really interested and like fans of the things, but aren't like actually directly connected with the things, or there's enough of like a distance that you feel less like you're being talked to or related to, but you feel more like a spectator, like looking in on something that you just kind of find interesting versus an actual depiction of what these things are.
Yeah.
And that kind of explains like how I feel about watching the queer characters in general in Hell of a Boss and Hazbin Hotel is they feel like they're not queer for themselves. They feel like they're queer for the audience. Like they're queer
Yeah.
for a person watching them because they want to experience that queer character. And I do think that is why this show is kind of made for people that like don't really, you can kind of have any opinion on sex that you want, and the show is just like, that's, here it is, whatever you want. You want this character to be shipped with this character, you want this character to hate sex, you want this character to like, it's just whatever you want to do. We are literally giving you every possible tool to make any kind of canon headcanon scenario that you want. It's very exhausting show.
It is, and like it's one of those ones where like I had to take like breaks while watching it because
Yeah.
like I just had like so much to say, but like it also just drained so much of my energy.
Mhm. Yeah, I feel like you have to do a lot of like mental gymnastics in your head to like kind of, for me it's like I should turn this off. Like that's kind of what I think a lot of the times, like watching Hell of a Boss, because I'm like, if I, where am I, like, where's my head supposed to be? Like, what am I supposed to feel? Like, am I
Yeah,
supposed?
am I supposed to like this? Am I supposed to hate this?
Is this
Am I
sexy? Is this not sexy? Like, what am I supposed to do? And like I think just seeing like how the fan base itself kind of reacts in such a unique way, it is very telling of this, because it does seem that like the fans have like very specific different ideas for like every single character, what they should do, what the canon is. I remember when they introduced the character of Lucifer, Charlie's father. I remember thinking like, why is Lucifer presented as such a young twink looking guy? Like, what's the point of this? And then I thought to my head, you know what? Someone is going to ship Lucifer with Charlie. There's going to be some father-daughter incest. And then sure enough, a few days after that episode came out, I saw a fan art of it on Facebook. I saw
like
I saw fan art
I
of
remember
it.
seeing like fan art of Lucifer and Alistair like going at it.
It's another thing where it's like, oh, we see they hate each other. That means they have to fuck, which is classic. That's classic fandom stuff. But
Yeah.
Ace, again, he's supposed to be Ace. Alistair's supposed to be Ace, or whatever. Everyone looks hot. That's a fucking problem. Everyone is a skinny twink. this is maybe the actual reason why it's so successful. Every character is a Tumblr sexy man. Every single character.
Yes.
I mean, right? I mean, like every single character is a tall, lengthy, white, brooding, kind of sexual character. It's only Tumblr sexy men, and it's just
Tumblr sexy men, the show.
It is. Like, how could you not love the show? You know, if you're that kind of fan, you're like, every character is what you want. It's all oncelers. Everyone's a onceler. You know, everyone's Snape. It's, you know, I speaking of character designs, I got some happy confirmation of a fact I always knew, but was never, I don't know if it was ever really said before. When I made my Hell of a Boss video, I said, Vivian Medrano is very, very obviously inspired by Invader Zim. That her style is very much just a take on Invader Zim. And I read an interview recently where she was talking to some newspaper or magazine or whatever, and she said that she, in her early days, would basically just only draw in the Invader Zim style and had to force herself to not draw in the Invader Zim style because she just kept drawing that over and over again. And I would argue that she hasn't really gotten like that far from it. If anything, I think what she discovered was a way to make the Invader Zim style really sexy. And maybe that's her great innovation, because I don't think you're supposed to really think the Invader Zim characters are like sexy. I think you're supposed
I mean, it is a kid's show. It is a kid's show.
It's a kid's show, but like when you see like an adult on Invader Zim, like I don't think you're supposed to think, oh, that's a sexy adult, because they all look very purposefully like weird and strange. Like you're not supposed to, I think, like them in that way. But I do believe that Vivian figured out a way to turn that very harsh style, that very like strong lines, a lot of points, and into something that's extremely attractive. Like everyone is a sexy Slenderman, you know? And that's
yeah.
Everyone's a hot Slender Man.
Everyone is attractive and skinny.
Yep.
The show.
And white, as we were saying before.
Yes, and white.
The trifecta of the Tumblr sexy man. Well, I think we are starting to get towards the end of this conversation. If chat has any final questions you would like to ask either me or Flowergothic, please do so now. And also, don't forget that we still have the super chat option if you want to give me a little cash. And also, because I haven't been saying this, subscribe to Flowergothic's channel. Like,
yeah, subscribe.
Really, like, go to her channel and subscribe. You know?
Working on a video about the 2018 Heather series. It's going to be epic.
I'm excited. I can watch your video instead of watching the show. So that's
because like I put this in like my notes. It is legitimately a harder watch than Hazbin Hotel.
That is so it's good, is what you're saying. It's a good. Sounds like
I've been like taking like almost every excuse possible to not watch it. Like I was like a little sick earlier this month. It's like, oh well, I can't watch Heather's. Like I'm having a bit of a cold, and that's just gonna make me more tired.
Oh my god. No, I totally feel that. That's right. Like every time I hear about a new Hell of a Boss video, I'm like, God, you know, this could be the one I don't watch. I could just stop right now. I could just not watch this one and not have a thought on it, and no one would know. I could just end it, but no, then I end up watching it, and I'm like, why did I do that? Why did I do that to myself? Even though I do think the last couple of Hell of a Bosses are actually pretty good. I do think the last two were good, but that's because it was Blitz and Fizz centered, and I feel like those are the only characters the creators actually care about anyway. So I think when it's focusing only on the gay men, then it's a good show, because that's clearly the element. That's what they want to talk about.
Yeah.
So we have a comment by Meepy Plup. I like that name. Is it true that you can't help Angel without hurting him? Heard this from a summary vid on him. What does that mean? Exactly.
I feel like that means like you know how like when you're trying to like help someone, especially for someone who's like in an abusive situation, there's always that risk of like I guess like driving them away, making them kind of like distant. I'm not quite sure if that's like what's being asked, but like to be honest, I'm not sure if like it is or is not possible to like help Angel reach Evan or whatever, reach some degree of redemption without like hurting him, because genuinely we don't know a lot about like the character's backstory aside from like his current situation with Valentino.
Yeah, I agree with that. To me, it feels like blaming the person instead of like the things that happen to the person. Like to me, it really feels like saying, "Oh, Angel Dust is at fault for his problems," and I think there is something to be said about like it's hard to help people if they don't want to help themselves. You hear about that in like therapy, that they have to kind of make the effort to be better. But I think the idea of like just saying if you help someone, you hurt them. I mean, sure, that might be a short, a short time or an immediate response. But I think like eventually, okay, so this video was by Schnee. An analysis. I don't know that YouTuber, so I can't.
I don't know that YouTuber either.
I can't comment on that. But if I were to armchair therapist, I guess, Angel Dust, I would think that helping is always good. I think sometimes people are bad at helping because we're not therapists or psychiatrists. And things like that. But I think to suggest that like Angel Dust will just hurt himself more if he's helped. It really just kind of feels like that I feel like it puts a fault onto him that I don't feel like is deserved. Because I feel like the things that he needs to work on are things that have happened to him, which are very devastating, like the abuse that the TV guy, not the TV guy. No, it's the TV guy. No, not the TV guy. The
Valentino, the moth guy.
That's how I remember the characters. The pimp guy, the TV guy, the radio guy. I think like I think what he needs to do is unpack the trauma, which is going to be very hard. And I think it would be good to have a support base for when he does that. And I think sometimes you do just need somebody there to do something. I mean, I guess it depends on how we're defining help. I don't like this idea of help being that vague of a term for it. I think that if he has a drug problem,
because like help can come in like all sorts of ways.
Exactly. Like I think if somebody is in the throes of drug addiction like he is and is traumatized like he is, that's not, to me, that's not Angel's fault. That's the fault of his circumstances and his environment surrounding about him. Obviously, he has to take the first step to change. But also, Angel Dust isn't real. I mean, not. So the show could just erase his trauma through like a song. Like, let's be real here. We don't know what's gonna happen.
I mean, they kind of did that a little bit with
they did
with Loser Baby in episode 4, which I remember I like touched on, because that song is fine if like you're dealing with like alcoholism or like industrial drugs, but like when you're singing that to an actual like SA victim, it just feels very tasteless.
But I think that's the point. Like the creators really see those as the same thing. Like, oh, you're a trauma victim. Oh, you're addicted to drugs, or you have a drinking problem. All the same bad thing. Well, the same good solution, or whatever it is. Like, I remember in the Hazbin Hotel pilot, one of the things that really confused me was when the Charlie and Vaggie first meet the newscaster lady, and she's like, "Oh, it's like I don't care for the gays," in a way that was like so like evil villain in a Saturday morning cartoon. It really felt like they were just like replacing like instead of they're just put gays in instead of like the Smurfs or those nasty Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And it was just like weird to me because it's like those aren't the same things. Like why are you saying that so flippantly like you would to any like weird thing that like the Shredder would say?
And like the most confusing thing is that like she's not even like an antagonist. She's like a bit character in the main show.
And she's even shown to be like kind of cool and powerful because like when she gets angry, she becomes this really powerful monster towards the end. So like what are we supposed to think of her as like dumb or bad? Like why are we showing her in a kind of cool light for saying this? Again, I don't understand the priorities of the show. I don't understand what it's trying to say, and I don't think the show itself cares. I think the show just wants excuses for
the show just wants to make a cheap joke.
Yeah, the show wants to make a cheap joke and have fluffy, kinky romances. In a way, yeah, and just it's like what H Bomber guy said about the Sherlock show is that we're just supposed to shut up and let the smart people do the smart thing, and not question it. I feel like that's kind of what Hazbin Hotel is like. Just shut up and let the sexy people do the sexy thing. It doesn't matter if you disagree. Just enjoy it. Lap it up. You love it. Stop asking me questions. Well, I think that's a good place to end it. Flowergothic, thank you so much for coming on.
Of course, thank you for having me.
Thank you. This was really fun. First guest. So congratulations to that. For the chat, we are going to be having more guests on the show, including a special monthly live stream that I will talk about more in the coming weeks. But until then, Flower, please hype yourself up. Talk to people what you got going on, your channel, all that stuff.
I have the channel Flowergothic. I do video essays on whatever hyperfixation I currently have. My next video is going to be about the 2018 Heathers series and how it's kind of a failed modernization of the original film. I can be found at Flowergothic most places. On Twitter, I am at the Flowergothic. I'm still calling it Twitter. I refuse to call it X, no matter what Elon Musk says.
I'm never calling it X. That's just confusing.
Yeah. And, feel free, subscribe, follow, comment on all my stuff, give me all your money.
Yes, please.
Please.
After you give me all of your money, give the rest of it to Flowergothic. It goes to me, and it will trickle down from me to Flowergothic. That's how economics work, right? Well, again, thank everyone so much, and we will see you hopefully soon. And I guess on my side, look forward to my next video, which will be coming out in the next month or so. Until then, check out my short video on Mother 3 that I just released.
Check it out.
Check it out. If you like Earthbound, I talk about the sequel that was never released in America. Don't ask me how I got it.
Magic.
Magic. All right. Bye, everyone. Goodbye.